Welcome to Ludo Lingo episode 11. It seems as though people on the internet have a hard time communicating their opinions on video games without tearing each other down. So this video is a message to all the chuckle fucks out there that can't leave things alone and feel compelled to go after anything that they don't like. The reason I've become so passionate about this is that I used to be that person. I was a hardcore Nintendo fanboy until I turned 15 or so. Then I became a PlayStation fanboy for a few years. Then I kind of realized I was an asshole in both scenarios. I'm not perfect now, I still slip up and say some stupid shit sometimes, but I'm at least working on it. I want people to be better communicators when it comes to sharing opinions on video games and challenging others' ideas. With all of the following statements, it's very important to remember that the point of this video is that there's nuance to all of these. They're not black and white. Some, I believe, are, but some leave room for interpretation based on what an individual's priorities are in regards to video games. I'm about to say just because you blank does not mean blank a lot. What I mean by this in some cases is does not necessarily mean. I just wanted a short phrase that could roughly encompass multiple points. I went for a theme, you'll see. Not every statement I make here is equally powerful or important. I don't expect anyone to completely agree with everything I say either. It's all about interpretation and nuance, baby. I'll be reading straight from a script here because I want to make sure I don't mince words or forget certain points. Prepare yourself for an onslaught of sometimes related but mostly unrelated one-off topics. If you'd like to see me expand on any of these in a future video, let me know. I'd like to start things off here with a blanket black and white statement. Just because you don't like something does not mean that you have to go out of your way to hate on it. I recommend using this phrase instead. It's not for me. Just because hundreds or even thousands of people come together on social media to agree with each other does not mean the majority of people feel the same way. Most people silently enjoy things. Just because you disagree with someone else's opinion does not mean that you need to go out of your way to make sure that they know that you disagree. Just because you disagree with someone does not mean you aren't able to have a conversation with them. I'm friendly with a lot of people that disagree with pretty much everything that I say, or vice versa. I enjoy learning about other people's opinions. As I said, there's nuance here. Of course, there's opinions and statements that are absolutely over the line. The problem arises when you draw that line way too close to yourself. Just because you like The Last of Us or God of War does not mean that you must write off games that don't have mature dark themes or a cinematic flair. On the other hand, just because you like Kirby or Mario games does not mean you should discredit games with a bigger focus on cinematics or storytelling. Just because a game is primarily focused on telling an interactive story like Detroit Become Human or Hellblade 2 does not mean it's any less of a video game. It's just a different kind. Just because a game does not have cutting-edge graphical fidelity does not mean it's ugly or unplayable. Alternatively, just because a game uses pixel art or a polygonal style does not mean it's ugly or too old looking. Just because you don't care about displaying pronouns or want to put pronouns in your bio does not mean that you have to hate on a game that displays characters' pronouns or allows you to choose your own. On the other hand, just because you like the inclusion of pronouns in various places does not mean that you should deem it mandatory for all developers or gamers to conform to your ideal situation. To tie those two things together, just because you see someone doing one of those two things does not mean that you must then generalize, lump unrelated people together and attempt to make a point, and then make the problem bigger than it is. I believe that most people are reasonable. Do not give in by overreacting to harsh statements by making equally harsh opposing statements. This only makes things worse and it snowballs from there. This applies to all of the statements in this video, but I wanted to emphasize it here. Just because someone disrespects you or your opinions does not mean you should turn around and disrespect other people that might happen to share a similar belief as the one who disrespected you. Perhaps those individuals don't intend to disrespect you, so why generalize and pick that fight? Don't become the instigator because some idiot baited you into it. Just because you like to play games on a particular gaming console or PC does not mean people are stupid for playing on a different one. Just because a game is similar to another game in some ways does not mean it should be derogatorily called a clone. Taking inspiration and iterating is good, actually. Just because a company tries making a new IP does not mean you should shit on it for not being a sequel to something else they've made. Just because a studio goes a new direction does not mean that you should shit on it strictly for being an attempt at a new genre. Honestly, this also brings up another point. It isn't inherently an issue for a developer to try out an existing IP in a new genre either. Experimentation can be good too. Just because a studio is known for a certain type of game does not mean that they can't try out new things. Will it work out? Maybe, maybe not. Don't tell developers to stay in their lane. Just because you're nostalgic for a specific older IP does not mean that that IP holder should be harassed into bringing it back or shamed for trying new things instead. Just because PlayStation wants to focus on making some multiplayer games does not mean that they're going to stop making single player games. Just because Nintendo generally makes games that are suitable for kids to play does not mean they are kiddie games. They're usually intended for all ages to be able to enjoy. Just because a game is multiplayer only does not mean it needs to be free to play. Just because a game is short does not mean it must cost less money than a game that is longer than it. Just because a game does not run at some extreme maxed out specs on your PC does not mean it's inferior to other games that do. Way too much importance is placed on graphical fidelity and performance. To be clear, performance is important, but some people place the bar way too high. Is it smooth and consistent? That's all that should really matter. Anything else is a bonus, not a requirement. Just because a developer didn't include a feature that another game has does not mean it sucks in comparison and should be demanded to be added. Not every game can include every feature in it. This is an unrealistic expectation. Now, here's 4 of these that are actually all kind of related to each other. Just because someone related to the development of a game holds beliefs that are counter to your own does not mean that you have to boycott or tear down the game. The art can be separated from the artist, in my opinion. Just because someone you disagree with politically or otherwise is affiliated with a game does not mean that you should criticize those that don't boycott or tear down the game due to it. On the other hand, just because you don't feel like the negative association is fair or relevant does not mean that you should put down those that do want to boycott it and belittle them for it. Just because you disagree with the boycott does not mean you need to flaunt your support for the game as if you're some righteous hero to get back at the other side. Just because you've been playing insert X game here for months or years does not mean you must continue to play it even if you're not enjoying it anymore, and then proceed to complain about it online. Move on, try new things, don't force yourself to play something. Just because you don't like pineapple on pizza does not mean you should disparage those who do like it. Alright, I feel like I could go on forever here. I had to just force myself to stop writing and actually make the video. Like I said earlier, it's all up for discussion. I'm just pointing out a bunch of things that popped in my head as I thought of this idea. It just feels like everyone's pissed off at everyone and it's just really annoying. So I wanted to highlight a few things that I found a little unnecessary, I guess. Do you specifically agree or disagree with anything in particular? Let me know. If you want me to expand on any of these ideas in a separate video, let me know. Looking forward to Concord, let me tell you that. Feel free to go check me out on Backlogged, on Twitch, and you can check out my Patreon as well if you'd like. Speaking of, thank you to my supporters on Patreon. We've got Hookie, Scion, Mex, Kinoth, and a new supporter, Braden. Thank you. Until next time, I'll see ya.